Welcome to Guitar Gavel, a place for people who love guitars. These are conversations with musicians, guitar enthusiasts, techs, and collectors about their guitar journey and their love of the instrument. Thanks for tuning in. Please hit the subscribe button, share with your friends, and be sure to sign up for our twice weekly newsletter at guitargavel.com. Hey everybody, this is David Still with Guitar Gavel and the inaugural Guitar Gavel podcast. And I am so pleased to present to you my new friend, Steve Kuykendall. We are buddies on LinkedIn. That's how we've connected. And now we get to connect in person. And Steve, we've just been actually hanging out here for about an hour before we started recording the podcast and just catching up, and a great story and a great guy. And so happy that I asked him. He said, yeah, I popped the question and he said, yes. And here we are, and we're going to get this thing started. And I told Steve I was going to give him the shortest introduction ever. And I'm keeping true to those words. So Steve, thanks so much. And this is such a pleasure, and look forward to hearing about your guitar story. I don't even have a lead-in question. You just start going and then I'll take it from there.
Okay, sure. Well, I am so happy to be here, and I have enjoyed your posts, and I immediately felt sort of a kinship and a connection because of the way you presented some of the interesting things you've put up on LinkedIn, and I've watched so many other people respond and have so much fun with your posts too. And I literally got to where I was looking for them every day, and it was almost like not being able to have your coffee. If there wasn't a post there, I was like, hey, what's going on here, man?
I hate to burst your bubble. I didn't have bandwidth there. I'm taking Friday off. Tomorrow's Friday. I'm taking the day off.
I don't blame you one bit. So listen, since I love the guitar and you love the guitar, I'm going to pick us up now. We're going to walk in here to what I call the room of guitar madness. And in your case, we could call it the gas chamber.
That's right.
You are a man who helps people with what we affectionately call gas.
Guitar.
Now, for our uninitiated, that means gear acquisition syndrome. Did I say that right?
That or guitar, but gear encompasses everything. So I think that's a better use of the word.
Yeah. Well, and I like amps too. I could spend all day talking about amplifiers and tubes as well, but we wouldn't need those if we didn't love our guitars. So this is the guitar room of madness, and I'm going to flip the screen now and start the tour. So
all right.
Here it goes. I've got you this way. Now, tell me, should I tilt up or down?
No, that looks just right.
Okay. What you're looking at here is one of my favorite guitars, and it's interesting, although it was a short-lived instrument from Gibson. It's called the Midtown. And unlike the 335s and 355s and archtop instruments that have a back and a top and sides, this has simply a solid body that's carved out and a top that's put on with binding, which is maple. And so not spruce. It's got a dark rosewood fretboard, real good quality Grover keys, and Gibson, pretty much standard Gibson pickups. It's a little on the heavy side, but it has a really bright sound as opposed to what you might expect from a 335. Great neck, solid instrument. They only made them for a couple of years, so that's kind of interesting. This one here is my 2014 120th anniversary. It's called the Futura Strat. I mean, not Strat, but SG, excuse me. It's got what's called a sidewinder pickup in the neck position, which is a P90, but it's a stacked P90, and it is noiseless. And then it's got, I think, one of the 498s at the bridge, which is another stock Gibson pickup. That's a great guitar with a really smoking neck on it. Very light, very woody. This little white puppy here, I changed out the pickups because they were so noisy. They had a nice tone, but they were too much buzz. So those are custom Seymour Duncan stacked P90s that are noiseless. And that is one of the early tribute series that it was slightly road worn. They gave it kind of a distressed finish. That is a light Les Paul, and it's probably about 12 years old. So I think I got that back in 2010. And there is a nice, just an SG standard. That is a smoking guitar. That's the widest fretboard they ever did on them. That has a 1.75 width nut. So kind of wide for most Gibsons. And then this is a sort of a beloved SG model. This has the mini humbuckers, which you don't see too often, but they have a real unique, spanky kind of tone. Block inlays. I like that guitar a lot. That one doesn't have any neck dive. It's very well balanced. Is this coming out okay, brother?
Yeah, you're dialed in. I'll let you know otherwise.
Right here, this is what I call Telly Corner. And as you can see, as we look through this room, this is where I teach. This is my desk. I've got my recording gear and processing here and kind of all this stuff. This room is roughly the size of a jail cell. It's 8 by 10. Of course, I wouldn't know firsthand, but so this guitar here that you're looking at is a kind of a, you don't see too many of these. It's actually hollow inside, and it is a Trevor Wilkinson Fret King, and it's the Jerry Donahue of the Hellcasters version. It's his signature model, but I had them route the pickup out for the neck position and put in a stacked P90 there because I don't like noisy P90s. I don't mind the noisy bridge pickup, and it does have a Seymour Duncan in there. And this has some real interesting wiring. They did a 5-way wiring schematic on this with 2 pickups. And believe it or not, you wonder how they can get those other 2 sounds out of it, but they do. And it works real good. So instead of a 3 pickup with 5-way, it's a 2 pickup with 5-way. So this guy here, this is my King of Kings Zion guitar by a small luthier in California, up in the mountains in the hills of California. His name was Dave Murphy, and this has some custom shop Seymour Duncans. It's got one that's called a Duncan Custom, and another pickup is called a Custom. Don't ask me why, but they sound fantastic. The top is spalted maple. As you can see, it has a burning for Christ at the upper bout, the 3 crosses of Golgotha, and there's no plastic anywhere on this. Everything on this guitar, including the panel covers in the back, are all made of wood, and it's got a Nirvana compensated nut at the top and Planet Waves locking tuners. The frets are actually brass alloy, so they're harder than nickel but softer than stainless steel. I think that's the perfect metal for frets. This guy here is a Diamond brand. It's called a Maverick, and they changed this headstock right after I got this one. It was like the last one. It's very light, and I swapped out for noiseless Fender pickups in this because these were also noisy. Can you tell yet that I don't like noise?
No, not at all.
These are my, what I call, this is my Strat Street. And this first one is actually a very interesting little guitar. This is a Squire, but it's a 60th anniversary Squire. Back in 2014, when they did their 60th anniversary series, there were 3 guitars. There was one representing Squire, there was one representing the Mexican factory, and there was one representing the American factory. And obviously they had the commensurate pricing differences. This guitar is one of the best Strats I've ever played at any price. But I didn't particularly fall in love with the pickup, so I had what's called the Everything set from Seymour Duncan put into here. I don't do electrical. I'm pretty good at setups, bridge, intonation, neck adjustments. I can do all that stuff myself, but I don't like electrical. So this guy here is kind of the new kid on the block, and you may have seen some of these lately. They call these the Esquire Contemporary Series. This one's kind of interesting. It does have a roasted maple neck. And the 5-way on this, position 1 puts these 2 in humbucker. Position 2 puts them out of phase like you'd expect. Position 3 is just this one. Position 4 is these 2 out of phase, and position 5 is the neck. So it's kind of like a regular 3 pickup Strat, but you get the humbucker position in position 1. And that's a really nice little guitar for not very much money. This one was kind of a whim. This is a Jimi Hendrix Strat, and I still have the pickups for this because they were so highly touted, but there was no quiet position for this guitar because on his guitar, there was no quiet position. There was not even position 2 or 4 would render a noiseless, buzzless sound. And so unless I just wanted to play clean tones all the time, I couldn't work with it per se to do classic rock. So here again, I went with the Seymour Duncan Everything set, which what it is, it's a 59 in the neck, a duck bucker in the middle, and a Jeff Beck at the bridge. And I have that on at least 3 instruments. So this is my only American-made recent Strat. This is from a few years back. This has second generation noiseless Fender single coils in it, and that's a great guitar. That's just a good one guitar can do it all type of a baby right there. It has a 1.687 nut width, whereas these first three we're just looking at have a 1.65. Then this one is one I'll never part with because this belonged to my grandfather. The body is a repainted 59. The guts were lost. We couldn't find them after he passed away. And that is a carven pre-wired pickup pick guard with the pickups and knobs in it. And when we got that, it cost $39. The neck is a 79, and it is a USA neck, and it fit perfect. So this is what I call a Frankenstrat. So consequently, it's not particularly valuable, but it does definitely have a very unique tone. And I never used the whammy. I had the whammy blocked into a hardtail, and that has Graph Tech saddles on it, the dark type, which sound great, and they do not break strings. I don't think I've ever broken on a string on that since I put those on, and I'm a notorious string breaker. Then here's the Yamaha that I was mentioning. These are really popular right now, and those are about the best sounding P90s I've ever heard. They are not noiseless, but I won't switch them out because they sound too good, and at least there's one position that's quiet. The middle position is quiet. But that guitar plays like you can't possibly imagine. It's so precise and so well balanced. Really, really good quality stuff. Yamaha always tends to rock. Then this guy here is what I call I don't call it this. It's the Lead 2. And what it is, it's a throwback reissue from something they did for a short time in the 80s. Fender likes to do that, revitalize certain old quirky models. And you can see it's a 2 pickup, not quite a Strat. It's a little different than a Strat, a little smaller body, and it has some different wiring configurations with the way you can use the switching. I don't know if you can see that or not.
Yeah, we can.
It has a great fretboard on it. But here again, the pickups were noisy. So what I've got there is a 59 in the neck, a 59 Seymour Duncan, and then a Jeff Beck at the bridge. This is a little oddball baby here. This is one of those Sterling Axis, which is trying to go for the guy who can't afford the $3,000 Music Man version. But that is a great little guitar, and it's got a really pretty fretboard, narrow frets, good sounding pickups. The whammy system works pretty good. I worked pretty hard to get it to do that. At first, it wouldn't stay in tune at all, but I worked it over pretty good, and now it seems to work pretty well. So that's everything that's up off the floor. Now, can you see this down on the floor?
We can tilt it down, the camera down. Maybe, yeah, there you go. Very good.
Okay,
Very
so
good.
this first one it's just a nice, this is their fat neck Les Paul special Epiphone makes. And you got to admit that in this last epoch of time, last 5 years, Epiphone is really up their game. I'm really proud of them. This is a great guitar, plays beautifully. And I did switch out these pickups too, because there wasn't even a middle position that was quiet on the original pickups. I still have them and they sounded fine, but these at least are reverse wired, reverse polarity, to where in the middle position I've got a quiet spot. But they sound great too, and that's a really fun guitar to play, and it was so affordable you could afford to drop it on its head and just pick it up and keep going. This is a kind of a rare thing now. This is called a Hamer Echotone, and Hamer being a company that was so promising, and you just recently did a really nice disclosure and a real informative write-up on Hamer. I really enjoyed that. Learned some things from that one. So this Echotone is obviously going after the 335 customer, and the pickups on it were really microphonic. They were quiet, but they fed back at the drop of a hat. You couldn't really do anything of any aggression without it feeding back. So I went for some Mighty Mites, and those are really good sounding pickups. They're pretty reasonable. That's got Mighty Mite pickups in it now. And then these two that you see here in the corner, this is the Bonamassa Les Paul, and that is a pretty excellent instrument on every count. That just is a great Les Paul. I'm going to say it's pretty going toe to toe with Gibsons that are over $2,000.
Wow.
And then over here, a couple of years before that, Bonamassa has had, I don't know, at least a half a dozen signature guitars made by Epiphone. And this is one of the ones from a few years ago. And so that's his 355. It's got the Bigsby. The Bigsby doesn't work so good. I'm not a big Bigsby fan. I just move it out of the way. But I like how it looks. And it plays great and has awesome tone. And I always feel like I suddenly can channel Roy Orbison when I put that on. Are you with me?
I'm with you. You just need the sunglasses, man. You'll be dialed in.
Yeah. It's got that Roy Orbison look to it. I'm telling you, the black with the white binding. If you look at any old footage of Roy, he's definitely got that going on. So now then, I never was a PRS fan, and I never got on board back in the beginning, but over time I have become a PRS fan. And I'm going to say to you, out of all the guitars in this room, and we'll talk about these in a minute here, but we'll start with these two. The Mira, I think I would be safe in saying it might be the best bargain value of dollar for dollar, pound for pound guitar of any guitar you could buy, irrespective of brand. That is just like the best deal. Now, it doesn't mean it's the best guitar in the world, but as far as how good it is and what you pay and what you get, I don't imagine it's possible to beat it, because it's just too good for the price that you can get those for. This one here is an S2, so this is a USA made instrument, whereas the Mira is Korean. But this S2 right here, I'm going to go ahead and say it, and I told one of my students who's also a PRS enthusiast, he has 3 also, I told him, I said, this is the perfect guitar. This is a very understated instrument, no bird inlays, just a dot neck. It has a coil tap. You can pull one knob and you get single coils on both. It's just a 3-way switch. The very simple non-locking tremolo. But guess what? Everything on this guitar works perfect. The tremolo does not throw the guitar out of tune, and you can dime it all the way down to the body. It has perfect intonation. The pickups sound fantastic. It's light as a feather. It has no neck dive. It stays in tune. And I just love that guitar. If I could only take one guitar to a gig, that would be the one I would take. And then this over here is the 35th anniversary S2. And that one, you can't see it in this light, but it's real pretty dark blue. And it has a nice flame maple top on it.
I'm glad you said that, Steve, because it looks almost a little purple in the light. So dark blue, which makes sense.
It's a dark, almost a midnight blue. Yeah. If I picked it up and aimed it up towards the light, you'd see the color pop. And outside, it really pops. If I'm outside on a stage with this, you can really see it. But in here, it's just kind of the yellow light this room produces. It doesn't really highlight the wood, but great guitar. It's got a nice, very comfortable neck. I think the neck profile is a little different on this one, so I still kind of like my little simple dot neck standard even better. But these last 3 are kind of 3 quirky and super interesting with some good stories. One of my best friends and best musicians I've ever played with, his name was Dean Clark. He just passed away a couple of years ago. He had like one guitar the entire time I knew the guy, which was a long time. And he had a custom. It was called a Custom 200. It was exactly like this, except where this one says Eastwood at the top, it said Custom. It was the same color. And it had these beautiful DeArmond P90s. These are like a P90, but they're really not a P90. They're a single coil made by DeArmond. And I'm going to tell you, those are quiet pickups. I can crank the gain up with those, and they are still quiet. They're the only single coil pickups I've ever found that are not noisy when you crank some gain. That's a really interesting guitar. It's a little on the heavy side, but it has a wide neck, which I like because I have Farmer John sausages for fingers. So my fat fingers like a wide, more real estate. This guy here is a copy of an older guitar called Custom Craft, and they were in the 60s, and you probably have already come across information on these if I know you. And this one has kind of a Jazz Master style tremolo, which it can be made to work pretty good. It's got a roller bridge, but it has a really distinctive tone. I gotta say, this one is the one I play slide on. If I get a slide on this and set the right tone, this thing has a voice, and it's really a great sound. So each one of these guitars kind of has a job that I have allocated to it. And this little quirky thing here, I actually use this one at church because I don't really do very many solos at church. At church, my job is more to framework the songs and play good chords and finger picking and things of that nature. This has a wide, short neck. It only has 19 usable frets. So that's pretty short compared to things these days. And it has gold foil pickups underneath those covers. And they're very quiet, although I think they are single coil. And then as you see, the knobs are all in a straight line. So it's a kind of an interesting setup. It goes volume, tone as you move towards the bottom of the guitar. Standard 3-way, really good wood. It's a bolt-on neck, but a really nice instrument. And this company is called Eastwood. And so their thing these days, and they've got just dozens of really cool historical models that they've revitalized. So these are the ones when I say I'm a sucker for quirky guitars, here's the proof.
And noiseless pickups.
Yeah, so I'm gonna flip around now.
All right.
Now I'm back. Now that was a pretty good tour. I'm sorry I talked so much. I hope it gave some interesting facts though.
No, it was perfect. You jumped right in, and I love it, Steve. You're rocking the Iron Maiden shirt, and I've got on this boring flannel, so I feel just out of place.
You know, I almost put on a flannel shirt. We should have exchanged the note and told each other how to dress. But today, I just thought for fun. You know, I love Iron Maiden. I'm a classic rocker. What can I say? I still listen to this stuff. I still put on Robin Trower, and I still put on Uriah Heep. I still listen to those records. I've still got all the records. So what can I say? It's who I am. It's how I learned to play. It's the influences that made me the player I am. The way I think about melody and about tone, I got from bands like Iron Maiden and Deep Purple and, you know, all of those. That's my age. That's my decade. The 70s, the late 60s and the 70s were my decade where I was finding out who I was on the guitar.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what carries through for the rest of your life. I mean, it's
yep, and I'll be 70 this year, and so it's still carrying on.
You know, and I'll just insert one little tidbit because I've realized later in life, we were talking earlier, I'm 43, so I was coming of age when Appetite for Destruction came out. Yep. Metallica was really hot, so think I was born in 78. So fast forward 10 years. I mean, that Appetite came out before that, but we're segueing from glam metal, hair metal, and pure metal to grunge as I was becoming a teenager, and hip hop was exploding, or you know, real like gangster rap. I mean, that's right. So this hodgepodge. So I'm all over the place because of that, and it's probably messed me up, or maybe made me just much better person. I'm not sure which is the case.
Well, it was such an eclectic, the latter half of the 80s in through the end of the 90s up to the millennium. That was a very eclectic time. There was so much change and shifting going on in the music business. It was hard to know what to follow. But, yeah. You know, with me, I like a little country. I'm not really a super country enthusiast, and I probably couldn't talk with a high level of intelligence about who's who in the country world. But I do pay attention to the hottest guitar players because I like that stuff. I know who Brad Paisley is, and I like guys like Albert Lee. And there's this hotshot new kid in Nashville right now. His name is Luke. He's in a band called Kelly's Heroes.
Okay.
I can't think. Oh, Luke McQuarrie. That's his name. Luke McQuarrie. He's a new 19-year-old kid who's like smoking everybody on wheels, just smoking them. And he's only 19. Yeah. So I keep track of like, who's the hot guys, you know, like Johnny Highland. Have you ever heard of Johnny Highland?
I have not, no.
Well, you and I are gonna have some private messages here where I'm gonna give you a list of people to take time to listen to over time, and you'll get a kick out of it. You'll find some new discoveries of some players you've never heard of before. But I'm my core personality with respect to the way I use vocabulary on the guitar comes from blues and classic rock. So anything that fits in there, and think about it, some of the country is kind of classic rock. If you think about Marshall Tucker or bands like Orleans or Leonard Skinner, they were kind of country-ish.
Yeah.
Even a band like Molly Hatchet. You remember Molly Hatchet?
Yes. Yes.
Their singer, listen to the way their singer sings. He sang like a country guy, but they had like heavy tones and heavy rock arrangements. But so there's a place where country and rock cross over pretty well, and I'm okay in that zone. Now, if you want to go back all the way back to the earliest country guys, that's, you lose me in there. I don't know those
No,
people, and
we
that's
won't
kind
have
of
a
not my
Bob,
thing.
not a Bob Wills conversation tonight.
No, I
Yeah.
couldn't tell you anything about that guy.
Yeah, he had a great was what he was known for in his lyrics. But well, so you're talking about, you know, the bands that have inspired you, and as you were growing up, I mean, what inspired you to pick up the guitar and start playing? What was it, a band? Was it a family member or a friend? How did that come about?
It was a family member, and I even before I really kind of had an identity with what bands I liked, I'm going to say, let's look at 1962. I was 10 years old. My dad used to play Dwayne Eddy records. And so I heard what was on the family stereo. And it was one of those big console stereos that was 6 feet wide and weighed 200 pounds, had a turntable down inside and a big AM radio and big speakers. And he would put on a record and it would be Dwayne Eddy and or somebody like that. He had a few different guitar guys that he listened to, and he had this one steel guitar record where the guy played steel guitar through a wah-wah, and I was always so captivated by that. That was the first time I ever heard a wah-wah. It wasn't during rock at all. It was in country. This guy played steel guitar, lap steel, pedal steel, with a wah-wah. And so I always remembered that. But my dad was a country picker, and he played with a wooden toothpick. He'd stick it in his mouth and he'd break it in half and he'd work it till the end of the toothpick was kind of soft, and he'd hold it in his hand, and that's how he strummed, with a wooden toothpick.
How about that?
So he would pick, and he played little story songs like the Wreck of the Hesperus, or he would play old Elvis tunes like 5'2", Eyes of Blue, or You Ain't Nothing But a Hound Dog. And he would strum, and he had a beautiful singing voice. The one thing my dad did have was a God-given singing voice, and he could sing like anybody. I mean, if you could think of famous people, he could sing like them. But he never made any money with his guitar, and I don't think he ever did a gig. But he played all the time whenever he wasn't working. He was a family man trying to pay the bills.
Sure.
We were very much middle blue collar American family. My dad was a maintenance man. He retired from the Army, went to work as an electrician and a mechanical maintenance guy at a glass plant. So I was with very much a blue collar family. My uncles, they were all carpenters or plumbers or painters. And we were a construction family. My dad was kind of the guy who could do more kinds of things. So he was a maintenance man because he could do it all. He could do plumbing and electrical and mechanical and carpentry and painting. And he worked on cars. He'd go out on a Saturday afternoon and strip his engine down and do his valves on the pickup in the driveway himself. And then he'd go in the house and have dinner. And then he'd sit down with his guitar. And so I was always impressed at my dad's voice, and I always thought I wanted to do that. So one day when I was 11, probably about a year into that urge, he kicked me down an old harmony. It was an old archtop harmony, non-electric, with a long tailpiece bridge and 2 F-holes, and it was like I'm sure you've seen these, Dave. It was like a black sunburst, a real dark sunburst with not a real drastic contrast, but it was a sunburst nonetheless. And it was a spruce top, because I remember the grain of the top. And he kicked me down that old guitar, and the action was probably high enough to put 50 cents in change underneath it. But it played. And so I don't even know what happened in that guitar. I thought about it earlier today as I was thinking about, if you asked a question like this, what I might say. And I have no clue what happened to that guitar. I wish I could remember where it was, because it probably would be worth a few bucks right now, and I would just love to have it. But he gave it to me. I used it until I moved on to something else, probably my first electric.
A quick question with the high action. You know, that's tough when you're starting out, and that could really turn players off, or would be guitar players off. Do you think, is it by chance that maybe that made you a better player?
Well, because he showed me 3 chords. Now, my dad did not like to teach. And he was not a teacher kind of guy. And it doesn't mean he never showed me how to do anything in my life, but he was not one who would say, okay, son, on Tuesday nights, we're going to sit down for 30 minutes every week and I'm going to show you how to play. He never did that. He sat me down one time when he handed me that guitar and he said, here's D, you do it like this. And then he said, now this one's called A7 and you do it like this. And then he said, and this one's called G and this is how you do it. There you go. And so since all of those were below the 3rd fret, the action wasn't really a problem because I only knew how to do 3 chords.
Yeah. All right.
So I would strum and fiddle around picking on the strings and just doing the silly things that an 11-year-old would do. Not a lot of direction. I never had a lesson ever, except that if you call that a lesson, it was 5 minutes. So
that was a
that's
tutorial.
how that started. But I just liked it so much. And the more I heard myself doing little things that were slightly recognizable, the more I knew I could probably do it.
Yeah.
And all my uncles and grandpa played. In fact, my grandpa built a couple of his own guitars. He knew how to actually build a guitar. He built electric and he built an acoustic. And I don't know what happened to those guitars either. There was a lot of cool guitars in our family. One of my uncles, my Uncle Ray, had a guitar that would probably be worth, if it's still around, I think his kids have it. It was an L5. It was like a 1958 or 9 L5 fat body that had P90s in it, but everything was gold covered. It was gold hardware and gold covered P90s. And it was a bird's eye blonde maple L5 Gibson with the original case. I bet if that guitar is still around, it's got to be worth $250,000. It's because it's one of those very rare, very beautiful. It was expensive even back then. So there were some nice guitars in the family. And like I showed you here with the Strat, the white Strat with the carven pickguard, Grandpa liked solid bodies too. So he had a few guitars around and they could all play a little bit, but I don't think a single one of them, of all the maybe half a dozen uncles with my dad, my grandpa, and a handful of uncles, I don't think any one of them ever did a gig per se.
Okay. Which is fine. Yeah. They played to play. They enjoyed it.
Yep.
What do you recall your first memorable guitar? So you had the one your dad gave you. You said it was a K or a...
No, it was a Harmony.
Harmony. Okay. And so progressing from there, do you remember the next one or the next?
Yes, I do remember the next one. The next one, you may recall a company that actually went away here in the not too distant past. In fact, I think you mentioned them in one of your recent historical overviews, the Coast Company. Remember Coast Command Industries? Command Industries that made Ovation and Talk.
Oh, yeah.
Well, their early incarnation of that company was called Coast Corporation. Okay. And they imported some Japanese instruments, and a couple of them that me and my cousin got. He got a bolt-on neck Japanese Les Paul, and I got a bolt-on neck Japanese SG, which is why I've always had this affinity for SGs. Okay. So it was a red stained SG, but it wasn't a set neck like Gibson's. It was a bolt-on neck, and it had terribly microphonic pickups. And it had a short fretboard. I think it only had 20 frets. Even a short SG has 22, and the regular ones have 24. So this was like a short neck SG. In fact, on some of those pictures I put up in the past year, you'll see some old pictures from me that I mentioned are 50 years old, and I'm standing there in a colored shirt, and I'm holding an SG. That was that SG. So that was the first real electric guitar I had, was this Coast copy. It didn't even have a name written on the headstock. Nothing. I think on the heel plate, it said Coast Inc. or something like that. So it was a no-name guitar, but I'll tell you what, we made some hay while the sun shined with those guitars. Yeah. As young teenagers messing around like we like to do. And that was my cousin Glenn, and he and I became the nucleus of my first real band.
What age were you in the first real band?
Like 16.
Okay.
And his house was a bike ride distant from my house. It took about a 10-minute bike ride. So I can't remember how I did it. I don't even think I had a bag. I think I just strapped my guitar on my back and rode my bike over to his house because he had an amp and I didn't.
You needed the Dan Electro amp in case.
Yeah, didn't have that. Had one of those later on though. But so I'd go to Glenn's house and we'd sit out on his front lawn and we would just strum, even unplugged, and we would write songs. I don't know how many songs we wrote. We wrote lots of songs, and they were probably mostly garbage. But we were so excited we couldn't think straight. We could hardly eat. We were so happy about our guitars. So, and I have quite a few pictures and stuff of what went on and became of that particular relationship. We picked up a bass player and a keyboard player and a few different singers over the years. And then later on, there was another guitar player. And so that was kind of a nucleus from which sprouted many branches.
Yeah. And it's
Cousin Glenn. So in my life, the beginning of the guitar journey started from the adults who already played and had some instruments. And that one kick down where my dad kicked me down that old harmony, and I finally had my own guitar. And then from then on, I've never been without a guitar.
It's the way it goes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I got gas real early.
And that's also the way it goes. And there's nothing wrong with that. Okay. So as you're, you're also, you're a professional musician. So you're, at a different level than, a casual player in the sense that it's what you have been able to do for a living, for the better part of your life, or the majority of your life. When somewhere, I don't know if it was later teen years or early 20s, was there, what did you have an aha moment, or was the aha moment when your dad kicked you down the harmony?
No, in fact, my memories of that, beyond that one lesson and getting the guitar and just kind of remembering that I had a guitar and how happy I felt, I don't have a lot of clear memory of kind of where that framework shifted or changed as I got older. Because remember, at that point, I still had to go through junior high and high school. During that time in my senior year of high school, my mom and dad divorced, and I ended up moving out in my own apartment even before I got out of school. And so I was a bus boy, and I made $1.65 an hour, and I got an apartment that was fully furnished for $80 a month.
Wow.
And that was when I had my own space. Then I realized I could do lots of things like young men find out when they are finally on their own. And when my first aha moment was after I had been in the band with Glenn and Dean and Brian on drums, another dear friend he's passed away. Dean has passed away. Glenn is still with us, fortunately. Our bass player passed away. He passed away about 10 years ago, way too young. So 3 out of the 5 are gone. So me and Glenn are the only ones left, and we both are Kuykendalls. So he's Glenn Kuykendall, I'm Steve Kuykendall. So the Kuykendalls managed to survive the onslaught of time. But that band really gave me the confidence to know that I could play, because we ended up moving to Nashville in 1972. So I was 19 when we got there, and we actually found that we could go down on Printer's Alley and go downtown to Showbud Music, and we could hang and discuss and talk and be with the world's best players. And we found work right away, and we were working the clubs, and we weren't even 20 years old yet. In fact, our drummer was 17. Our bass player was 18. Me and Glenn were 19, and Dean, the keyboard player, had just turned 20. So we were walking the halls of RCA Studios with REO Speedwagon recording You Can Tune a Piano, But You Can't Tune a Fish right down the hall. Wow. And Roy Clark and Porter Wagner and Dolly Parton in one studio around the corner on a different hallway. And in another floor, in another studio, while we were there walking around, there was Steve Stills and Al Cooper of Super Session, who was a keyboard player, famous keyboard player, and a producer. And that guy was responsible for bringing a lot of bands that were unknown into the public eye. And who was Michael Bloomfield on guitar. So I was actually, as soon as I found myself in Nashville, I thought, I can totally do this. and I had this sense in myself, in my mind and my heart, I can do this. I can do what these people do. And then from the moment I believed that, irrespective of road turns that happened, and plenty of things happened in my life, it was never just like, absolutely, well, there's my path, here I go, watch me. No, it wasn't that easy. I had all kinds of things that knocked me left, knocked me right, knocked me down, knocked me out. But I never, ever thought after that I couldn't make a living with my guitar. I've always known that if every other kind of job was to fail, I could at least go make $50 with my guitar. And I've never stopped doing that. And I hate to admit it, and it'll probably get some laughs, but did you know that a guitar player in a nightclub playing classic rock has not had a raise in 50 years?
Yeah.
Because I was making $50 for 4 sets in 1972, and guys in Fresno right now, or Modesto, or Sacramento, that play a 4-hour gig are still making $50 to $75 after 50 years.
Yeah. I just had this conversation about 6 weeks ago with one of my dad's friends who owned a music store in Atlanta, and just had this exact conversation.
Yep. It's the only industry that I can think of. And I've been in plenty of them. I've been a cook. I've been a restaurant manager. I've been a painting contractor. I'm still a licensed bus driver. I still drive bus part-time just to fill in the gaps. But even while all that, the only thing I've done that has never had a raise is play guitar. If you guys that go out and work for 2 to 4 hours on their guitar in a nightclub or a restaurant and make $100 are still the majority of the guys out there doing it. Now, if you're lucky enough to put together a real good corporate band that can play the big casuals, like Bank of America has a Christmas party, or Chrysler Motors has a sales convention and have a dance, and you go to work for them, that's different. Now that's a whole other market. Then those guys can make $300-400 a piece in a night. But even that, in the great scheme of the entertainment world, that's peanuts.
Yeah,
that's peanuts. A good architect can make $400 a day or better. A plumber who makes less than $200 a day is hurting. I mean, he's like crying in his beer. So I it's a hot button for me. But the weird thing about it is that the guys out there that have the clubs, they know you love it so much that you'll do it anyway.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so I mean that's pretty cool. So you were in Nashville, you had the moment, that's driven you ever since. And once you knew that was the case, that's what you were going to do, and you've done it. Like you said, but with your turns here and there, and raising a family and all the things that come along with life. Through all of that, since you've been a bunch of places, and you mentioned you've lived a bunch of places, and you've got a bunch of guitars, but you don't have, all the ones you want. What are some ones that were within your reach, within your grasp, you were thinking about pulling the trigger on it, or a trade or whatever, and you didn't? Do you have any regrets on a couple? Not, and I don't mean deep regrets. You just, man, I wish I had gotten that one.
Yeah. In retrospect, as I look back to the guitars that have come into my hands and left my hands, I think I have more stories about ones I wish I hadn't sold than about ones I wished I had bought that I didn't buy.
Okay.
For instance, if I had them all back right now, I was thinking about this earlier today, sort of kind of get my mind ready. I had a 61 Strat. I had a 59 Gibson Melody Maker. I had a 62 Country Gentleman, a Gretsch. I had a 63 Gretsch Tennessean. I had a 67 Antigua finish Strat with a maple neck. I had a 63 L Series Strat. I've had a 1961 Martin Dreadnought, owned by one of the best guitar players in the world, who played for 2 presidents while he was alive. His name was Cletus Clark. You can look him up sometime. He's got a Wikipedia page.
All right.
It's those ones that I no longer have, that I sold either in a situation where it was because I needed money, or I was bored and got enamored with some other thing that was a flash in the pan instrument that I thought was so cool that I'd never seen. And I would either trade or sell one of the other ones to get this newer, cooler looking thing, only to find out I wish I'd never sold. I mean, if I just had back the Strats alone, the 61, the 63, and the 67, I could retire quite well on what I could get for those if that's what I wanted to do.
Right. Right.
But so those are the ones that that stick in my mind that, gosh, had I known then what I know now. Nobody knew that a Les Paul that you could buy in 1962 for $325 would now be worth $325,000.
Right.
Nobody knew that.
No.
The Strat that I had, the 61, I bought it for $100 from a man named Esley Durst, who was really a keyboard player, and he only played it on 2 or 3 songs a night, where he would just leave it strapped on, and then he would step aside from the keyboard and play it, strum a few chords, and then go back to the keyboard. And he got tired of it, and one day he said, "I don't even really play this thing. You want this? I'll take $100." And that was a lot of money to me. And I thought, I don't know, man. He goes, "No, really, come on, $100. I need the money." And so I gave him $100.
Yeah.
Now that guitar right now, that 61, would be worth at least $30,000.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's those kind of things I think that I look back on the most, and I laugh, but I also cry.
A little bit, yeah. You have to, but they're great stories, and yeah, no one knew, and the whole world was doing the same thing. You know, trading for it. Man, I don't like the way this one looks. You know, you don't think it's, you know, I mean, when you're 20, you don't think what you have is going to be a collector's item.
No, right. Nobody knew. I really, honestly, nobody knew that guitars would actually become a higher guaranteed profit investment than stocks.
Yeah. Yeah.
People right now that have liquidity, that can buy rare guitars, get a better return than people in the stock market. And that is a mathematical fact. And that's just not Steve talking. That is the truth.
Yeah, it's an asset class. I mean, it's amazing. You're absolutely right.
So you get guys like Joe Bonamassa, who has a great career, and he's playing his head off, and he makes great money in his live tours, and he's selling albums, and his endorsements are through the roof, but he's also a custodian of probably more Fender amplifiers and old Marshalls and Les Pauls and Telecasters and Strats than anybody else right now, except maybe Jonathan Kellerman, but his collection is not so much on those instruments. Kellerman's collection has to do with more esoteric instruments, as you'll see. But so, you know, Bonamassa isn't going to have to worry, because no matter what he does, you know, musicians who are live entertainers for many, many years, they don't have a pension. They don't have a trust fund. They don't have a thing like when you work for Pacific Gas and Electric, or you work for Apple for 25 years. They're putting money away for you out of every check. Well, that doesn't happen unless you do it yourself if you're a musician. Right. So I think guys like Bonamassa who buy gear, that's pretty smart. It's fun and it's beautiful and it's smart.
What else do you need?
Yeah. So that's his retirement.
And as just a one-off, because of the cookie trackers, you know, for my internet browsing, and he's in like 20 commercials that I see on the internet every day. It's so funny. It's great. Yeah, he's all over the place, which is wonderful. Okay, well, I'll kind of leave you with this, and I said I wouldn't ask you your absolute favorite guitar, so I won't ask you unless you have an answer. But if we're on the desert island with 2 or 3 guitars.
Yep.
What is
it? Okay. I do have the answer to that. And like I said, and I'll repeat it, if I could only take out one guitar. Now, I never take out just one, because I'm a notorious string breaker. And if you only take one guitar and you break a string, you're in a world of hurt, because you have to take 10 minutes off the stage to go replace the string. So I always have a backup guitar. But let's say it's the desert island scenario. I am going to say it's going to be this guy right here. It's going to be this S2, because it's never broken a string and it just is perfect. So PRS, I hope you're listening to me right now. This is a perfect guitar. I'm telling the truth as sure as I'm standing here. Now, that being said, now I'll say to you that if I wanted to take a couple more that I took just because I wanted to play them on specific song, because they are just so much fun in a certain kind of a setting or a certain kind of tonality, I'm going to say to you, that gold Strat right there that I showed you a while ago, that little Esquire 60th anniversary, that is a player's dream. It's a great, great guitar. And the other one I'm going to have to say this little guy right here, this nice little white Les Paul right there. That is one of the first distressed reissues that Gibson started doing, and it was like 2009 or 10. And they've done a lot of them now. Now they do them like crazy. They're doing them all the time. If you watch what Gibson's doing, even in their newer, they've gone through a lot of changes. But that guitar right there is just a solid, rock solid. It's what I call a working man's guitar. It's not fancy. There's no frills, but it sounds great and it plays great and it stays in tune. So those would be my three. So I'd have a Les Paul, a Strat, and a PRS. Well, that's not so bad.
It's not. I was taking notes, by the way, while you giving your three. I've got them starred here on my notes page.
Yeah. So those would do it. Those would work. And in the other room, I've got that little Nighthawk. That's a great guitar too. People that have never played a Nighthawk, they forget that is one of the few models that Gibson made with a 25.5-inch scale length. Mm-hmm. People always automatically think everything Gibson ever made was 24 3/4. Well, that's not true. The L6 was a Fender scale length. This Nighthawk is a Fender scale length, and there are the RD, that RD you recently talked about. Yeah, that is a 25.5-inch scale length. So I kind of like those, and that Nighthawk. That middle pickup, that single coil middle pickup in that Nighthawk, that is one of the most beautiful sounding pickups I've ever heard. Now, I don't know if it's because of the weight of the body and just the way they wound the pickup or all of it together, but somehow when I go to that tone and I want to finger pick some beautiful chords with a chorus on and a little delay, it just sounds like heaven. It's so beautiful. I told my friend, one of my students has one too. And he and I looked at each other and I said, I'll never sell my Nighthawk. And he looked at me with the most serious look and he goes, me neither, man. and I think pretty soon you're not going to be able to find those anymore because they're not that ubiquitous. The Nighthawks, not that ubiquitous, but they're quirky. They've got that strange little body, that weird little body with the narrow little waist and the sharp Florentine cutaway. They're just kind of like, what were they thinking? But the more you look at it, you go, it's just cool.
Yeah.
I mean, what could be more fun or better than all that stuff? I come in this room every day and I look around in here and I go, oh my gosh, I'm so blessed to have these beautiful ladies. And I think it's okay for me to call it my harem. My wife knows she's number one.
And she has some of her own instruments too, as we've talked before.
She does. She has 4 different basses. She has 2 pianos in the house, and all the keyboards down at my man cave are hers. So she's got 3 keyboards down there, and she plays recorder and penny whistle real well. So she's got a whole bunch of those. So yeah, she's pretty understanding, and she puts up with all my little foolishness and my quirkiness. She's a good gal. I'm very lucky in that way too. It's good to be married to a musician.
Isn't it? Y'all are a match made in heaven.
Yeah,
seriously,
I would say so, and we thank heaven for it all the time.
That is great, Steve. Well, this has been so much fun. Thanks so much for your time. We'll hang on. We'll end the recording, and you and I will hang out for another minute. But this has just been a blast. You probably weren't paying attention, but I've had a grin like 5 miles wide the entire length of you talking about your guitars. My face is kind of hurting now.
Well, when I was talking about the guitars, it was turned the other way. So maybe I'll see that later if I ever get to see the recording.
You will.
And let me thank you. You are so much fun, and you're just every bit as delightful and insightful as you are in the things that you write. And you're even way better looking live than you are in your picture. You need to update your picture on LinkedIn, buddy.
Thanks. Well, I think I have more like brown hair in it, so I'm letting it live for a little while, Man, this is great, Steve. Thanks so much. I really appreciate it. I'm sure it was a treat for everyone that watched and listened. And we'll hang out here in a second. Thanks to everybody for tuning in to the first Guitar Gavel podcast with Steve Kuykendall, and just a blast, and more to come. And thanks so much, everyone. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for tuning in to the Guitar Gavel podcast, and a special thanks to Steve Kuykendall for composing this music and being such the great guy and friend that you are. As a reminder, hit the subscribe button and sign up for our twice weekly newsletter at guitargavel.com.